spirits of those long dead may still remain tethered to this world, their spirits haunting people or places, ensuring that their presence is made known and not forgotten. It's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I still don't know exactly why it happened, but I'll just start nonetheless. I was visiting my mother in Montebello, another small city in Los Angeles County. Honestly, I never liked being there because my mum and I got into a lot of fights and was the main reason I lived with my father. I'm gonna be straight with you. I wasn't a great son, nor brother. It's the reason I was homeless and went through a lot of shit. I had to learn what I refused to from my parents. But anyway, I digress. It was the summer of my sophomore year of high school, going into my junior year. I had many friends, but lost touch with most since I moved to my father's house. I was just sitting on the stairs that led up to my mum's apartment, and my mother made me watch my two younger sisters as they played with the other kids from my mum's apartment and neighbouring ours. As it was getting late, around about 8 or 9 p.m, my mum started calling me and my sisters back inside. One of them was running around playing some games, causing me to run after her until she got tired. The other one, who is a year older, was talking to her friend April, and this young guy I had never seen before. My mother had been living in that apartment complex for 6 years now, so it was strange to me that I had never seen him before. As I walk my younger sister inside, I tell my other sister that my mum said that we had to go back in. She just ignored me as I walk past to the stairs, making sure that the youngest actually went inside. She used to be rebellious like me growing up. Right when my younger sister got inside, I turned around to get the other one. She was miles deep in a conversation with April and the other guy. I was a bit rude and told her straight up that she needed to get inside. Who the hell was this guy anyway? As I looked towards the guy, she giggled and just told me it was April's friend Joel. So she resumes her conversation, and they're talking about the paranormal. April was telling my sister that she had a little boy in her apartment, and my sister telling April about the old man in my mother's, which was actually true. At that point, their conversation piqued my interest. At first I was just listening, but then I started questioning them, because I wanted to make sure that their story didn't have any holes. At the time, it seemed to me that they were indeed telling me true events. I wasn't really creeped out by their stories, to be honest, only because I've seen and been through things that I can't even explain to this day. Well, that was until I asked the random guy, John, what was the scariest thing he had ever experienced. And this is what he told me. That after his grandpa died, he'd been followed by a shadow man, and that had been going on since he turned 7. He always thought it could be his grandfather, so he didn't really mind. That is until he got to the age of 11. This shadow would break things and felt more negative. He would say this shadow would pick him up from his bed and smash him back down, waking him and his grandma, who slept in another room. The whole time he was telling us this, I could hear his voice cracked and his eyes beginning to water up. I began to feel a chill run up and down my spine as he said the next thing. Sometimes I still see it. I was standing right in front of him, staring at him, and from the corner of my eye on the left side of him, a huge black mass rose out of nowhere. I couldn't even see through this thing. I'm guessing my face dropped or something, because the thing I heard him say was, "You saw him, huh?" I don't know what I saw. I can't explain it. I just shuddered. I saw something rising from the floor behind you." He actually brightened up and said, "Finally, someone else saw it." I told him I believed him before I actually saw it though. He tried to look behind me, like if something ran behind me, and he tried to follow. This is where I begin freaking out and asked him, "You okay, dude?" He just looks puzzled and says, "Oh, nothing. I just thought I saw your little sister behind you wearing a little black dress." I looked at him even more confused, and I told him that she was already inside with my mother. I asked him to describe the girl he saw, and I shit you not, this guy literally said she had blonde long hair, really light skin, and wore a dress, and was as tall as my youngest sister, and was just staring at the floor. If you guys don't know why this creeped me out, I'll tell you. It's because my older sister and I both had an incident with a spirit girl that looked exactly as she described. I was speechless, and my eyes were watering. The only reason I believed what he told me was true was because my older sister and I never told a soul about what we had experienced, and I still get the chills remembering that day. I never had an incident with the girl ever again, but my father's side of the family always believed my baby brother, who had a couple of disabilities, played with her all the years we lived in that house in Whittier. I tend to wonder at times who she was, and if she still is at that house. I guess I'll never know. I'm not willing to see if she'll follow me somewhere else. I was kind of scared to be in my room the next couple of days, since I had to sleep in that room alone. I wish I could say I've slept somewhere else in the house, but my father wasn't too nice, and would get mad whenever I tried to sleep anywhere but my own room. I didn't want to tell him the truth, why I didn't want to be in there, because he never liked talking about the paranormal or spiritual stuff. So, I was forced to remain in that cursed room, scared that one day that girl may come again. It was quiet in my house. Well, quiet in a paranormal sense for a few weeks. I eventually forgot about the pictures that I took that night the fear possessed me, and I was in my father and stepmother's room watching Paranormal State when they were in the front room watching a movie with my uncle and baby brother. It was an intense episode, so my eyes were glued to the screen until a commercial came on. I went to grab my phone and noticed I left it in my room down the hall. I'm going to have to try and explain to you what the route looks like. If you walk out my father's room, on the left side is the living room, and on the right is the hallway closet. As you walk down the hall and get to the end, to the left side would be my room. Forward would be my older sister's room, and on the right is the bathroom. So I went down the hall, went into my room, and got my phone. As I grab it, I turn on the screen to see if I have any messages. There was nothing, so I start walking back to my father's room. As I get to the hallway, I see a figure of a girl right in front of the hall closet door. I just assumed it was my younger sister. It was around her height of 4'8", so I walk past the figure and try to put my hand on her head, to be a mean brother and push her out the way. My hand just fell through, like the figure wasn't even there. I was scared shitless, and I turned to see the figure, but nothing was there. My father saw me, just standing there frozen in place, and said to me, "Is there something wrong, boy?" I shook my head and asked where Isabel was, and he told me that she was still at my mother's house. So I started watching TV again, shaken and breathless. I kept looking in the hallway to make sure that nobody was out there. I eventually tell my older sister that I believe there is something in the house, because she used to like watching paranormal shows and stuff with me. She started to tell me an incident that happened to her a month before. She said that one day she came home from work and just fell asleep on her bed, and after a while she started to hear someone crying and calling her name. She thought it was my younger sister and asked her what was wrong. The crying continued, and my sister got annoyed, got up, and went to yell when she noticed that no one was there. So she walked around the room to see where my sister would be, and then around the house, and finds no one. She got so scared that she left to her boyfriend's house and waited until my father got home. When she told me this story, I got chills. I told her what I saw and showed her the pictures I took. It goes without saying, we both believed that there was a spirit in our house. I would like to give you some background information. My grandmother started smoking from a very young age and had a lot of health issues because of that. My sister and I were very close to her growing up, and we spent every weekend at her house. I felt that I could talk to her about anything, so it was absolutely devastating when we found out she had lung cancer my freshman year of high school. So, flash forward to just after graduation, and sadly, she passes away. So we pack up everything and we move back to Louisiana in order for us to be closer to my grandpa. For a while, we lived in their little double. On top of my grandma's cancer, she also had diabetes, and so she always had candies around for when her blood sugar dropped, one of which was a bowl of suckers. Around Christmas, my family found a place of our own, and everyone but me had moved out, and I was just staying with my grandpa to keep him company, and I was staying in my grandma's room. And this is going to sound really creepy on my part, but that's where she died, because she didn't want to die in a hospital. One day, while everyone was at Grandpa's house for whatever reason, my mum was in Granny's room, and she finds her bowl of suckers and asked me if I had eaten any of the sweets. I say no. Well, apparently, someone had managed to eat them without even unwrapping the suckers. There were no ants or any other bugs in the bowl, no big holes in the wrappers, and the wrappers were still sealed with cigarette ash in the bottom of the bowl. My mum had also told me that she used to see the closet door open on its own, and she would go and close it again. Personally, I've never felt alone in that room. Not in danger, just not alone. I've also noticed that my anxiety gets worse if I spend a lot of time there. I do wonder though, did Grandma come back for a few little sweet treats? If so, I miss you, Grandma. When I was on my early teenage years, my parents told me to look out for my grandmother, since her helper got injured when she accidentally slipped going down a ramp. Since it was my grandmother personally who asked my parents for me to look out for her at her house, I gladly agreed. As I remember, my grandmother was on her 90th year by that time. It was okay for me, since our house is just next door. Before going to school in the morning, I would prepare her breakfast. Right after going to school, I would go directly to my grandma's house and assist her with whatever she needed. Make her a cup of coffee, fetch her slippers, guide her going to the bathroom, and even watch TV with her. Every night, I would tuck her in bed. I slept every night inside her room just by the sofa near her bed. There's a half wall separating us. It remained half covered for me to see if she was still doing okay. We share one electric fan that turns simultaneously to both of us. Though there is an air conditioning unit in her room, and we only use it if it's burning hot outside. All was going well, and we enjoyed accompanying each other for the past few months. And then, strange things started to happen. One night, while lying by the couch inside my grandma's room, I heard the door creak. I can see clearly from where I was lying that the door had been opened. I thought that maybe it was just not closed, and the window blew it, which sometimes happens. I decided to stand up to the door and close it, and I looked outside to see if anyone may have pushed it open, but there was no one there. I closed the door and went back to bed. After a few minutes later, it opened once more. I again got up, thinking I might have just not closed it tight, or someone is awake playing a prank on me. I immediately looked outside and saw someone running up the next floor giggling. I quickly thought it was my cousin, because his room was upstairs and we do prank each other. With a bit of frustration, I shouted at him, "Dang it, Mel, stop playing around, you'll wake up Lola." Afterwards, I closed and locked both locks of the door so that he wouldn't be able to repeat it. I was irritated and decided to lie down and pick up my phone. I messaged my aunt to tell her that my cousin shouldn't be doing this at this time of night and that it could wake Grandma up. I decided to play games on my phone in order for me to fall asleep, and after a few minutes, my eyes are ready to close when my phone beeped. It was a message from my aunt, and it read, "Hi Mac, Mel is not home from school. They're finishing up their dance practice. Maybe it was Mike who you saw." I had goosebumps. That couldn't be Mike. I knew Mike wasn't home yet. He told me. After realizing that, I heard a sound. The rattling sound came from the door, as if someone were trying to open it. Click. I heard the sound of the first door handle being unlocked, and then a click from the other. I was very sure the sound of the second door lock, and then the door slowly swung open. From where I was lying, I could clearly see the door slowly open, and when the door was fully open, I heard a giggling sound and saw a shadow cast from the light outside. A little kid standing just by the door, and at that moment, I saw it move as it was slowly walking inside the room. I was freaking out and was absolutely starting to panic. I didn't know what to do and quickly covered my face with the blanket. I heard the sound getting louder and louder as it was getting close to me. Next thing I knew, I woke up at our house with a high fever and couldn't speak. When I got better, my mom told me that my cousin was knocking by the door that morning, but I wasn't answering. My grandma was the one who hurriedly opened the door and told my cousin that I was shaking and had a high fever. They tried to talk to me, but I wasn't speaking, so my cousin decided to lift and carry me back to the house to get treated. I don't recall any of that happening. I didn't tell them what I saw that night, and thought they might think I just had a bad dream. But it was very real. 2 days after getting better, I returned back to my grandma's house after school. She asked me to prepare a meal for her, and a hot chocolate because she was feeling hungry. I went to the kitchen and prepared it, and she asked me if I could take it to her room because her knees were hurting, and it was difficult for her to get to the kitchen. I agreed and went back to the kitchen to bring the meal to her. As she gave me the chocolate, she said, "Mac, can you also give that little kid some chocolate? She's been standing there all day now." I felt a chill over my body as she pointed to the door where she claimed the little kid was. I turned around and no one was there. I tell her that no one's there, but she kept on insisting and pointing that there was a little kid standing in the door. After that, I decided to tell my parents what happened when I got a high fever and what just happened. They weren't at all surprised of what I told them. They told me that sometimes at night they see by the kitchen window a little kid running around as if it were playing, and they'd even hear it giggle. They told me that they never let me know about the little ghost girl because they were afraid that I wouldn't do it. A few weeks later, they got someone round to bless the house, but after that, I started alternating turns with my brother because the ghost girl was still around. In the summer of 2007, I was visiting my boyfriend Angelo in Adelaide. We'd gone to Port Elliot one day and decided to book a room and stay overnight at the Royal Family Hotel. The building was definitely old, and we opted for the basics, with no ensuite bathroom. It was comfortable and charming, with a great band playing that night, and we had an excellent time. Of course, that was weird. What was weird was that when we checked in that afternoon, we were given our keys and put all of our things in the room. I told Angelo I was going to pay a visit to the restroom, and Angelo waited outside on the second floor balcony whilst I went to the ladies' room. I still had the room key with me, and I'd left my bag in the room, so when I stepped into the bathroom stall, I made it a point to try and hang the key up on the peg on the inside of the stall door. The ring was too small to hang on the peg, so I carefully positioned it with the oversized plastic tag on one side of the door. It was a bit of a chore actually to balance it just right without it falling, but I finally got it to stay. I did what I had to do and collected myself, and then reached for the key. And it was gone. I knew for sure with no doubt that I put the key there, and that I would have heard it fall if it had fallen onto the ceramic floor tiles. No one could miss that. I was the only person in there, as a woman had left the next stall for me in order for me to go in, as there was a woman who had left the stall next to me, washed up and gone. I'd heard the keys rattling, but I assumed it was her keys. I looked all over the bathroom, even going as far as glancing into the toilet. They were way too big to be flushed down, I thought, and I knew I was losing my mind or something. Of course, I'm dreading telling Angelo that I had the keys a whole 10 minutes and lost them. Not trying to mention having to ask for another room key from the hotel manager, I told the manager maybe there'd been some mix-up with the keys, and I took them. I told the manager maybe someone had mixed them up with their keys and taken them, because I really thought he'd think I was crackers. Angelo was amazed I could lose them so fast, and I thought I'd surely heard his thoughts on that, and as I did, rest assured, it occurred to me that being an old hotel, perhaps we had some playful ghosts. I'm an intuitive empath, so when I heard my inner voice telling me I should check the bathroom again, I decided to give it a try. I came out of there with keys in hand. They were positioned in the very same place and in the very same way I'd put them. I mean, in exactly the same position in the stall I had placed them in. I don't know how that happened. No one could have known that they were like that but me, and no one could have taken them whilst I'd been in the stall. Angelo and I were both a little freaked out about it, and we walked down to the pub. As we were doing so, we passed an employee who was coming up. I stopped her and asked, "Do you have ghosts by any chance?" expecting to hear a giggle and a polite no, with a shaken head. But to my surprise, she said, "Yes, we do actually. A little girl and a little boy." I asked if perhaps they liked playing tricks on the guests, and she said that they did. So, if you decide to stay in this haunted hotel, watch your keys, and if something comes up missing, most likely the children will return it to you if you walk away and come back. Who knows with these playful little imps? To start off, I had a great uncle who died from a heart attack while sleeping a couple of months before, and I hadn't known about it yet. I was about 3 years old and alone inside the living room of my grandma's house. The time was 5:38 a.m. when it happened in the room, and I had been playing with the Jack-in-the-Box. The windowsill had a couple of stuffed animals on it from my grandma's collection. 1 tiger, 2 bunnies, and a turtle. The rug was made of long, soft fabric, and there were 2 reclining chairs and a couch on the right side of the room. On the left was a big old TV. My dad's NES and Super Nintendo were plugged in, because he was teaching me how to play video games an hour or 2 earlier. In the back of the room were my aunt's porcelain doll collection and a large glass cabinet. There were 13 dolls inside. At the time, it was raining outside, and my dad was drinking a can of beer. The room had a few cobwebs here and there, but the only spiders actually around were Daddy Longlegs. The rain was pouring down on the small house we were in. Snow was very little, but a couple of splotches were around. We never really got much snow in that house. My aunt started to cook dinner with my grandmother, and they were making bacon and eggs for dinner, because it was mine and my dad's favourite. Also, there were 3 model cars, 1 red, 1 blue, 1 black. My dad had just bought me them, and they were still in the box. They were all around the table between the 2 recliners. The light was dimming, because it was going out, and this house is built in the woods, so we were around very few other houses. The house was surrounded by gravel, and around that grass, with about 17 or so trees. The painting was of a mountain and a wolf pack howling. My dad and grandma came in. Apparently, I had told them that my great uncle was talking with me, and with some other people, and he said to come into the hole with him, and I said no. My grandma asked, "Where's the hole?" and I pointed towards a painting on my grandma's wall. There was a hole my grandma put in the hole years ago. You see, there was a hole behind the painting. The only people who knew about it were my grandma and my aunt. You see, they made a hole there for kittens to climb in, and of course when they stopped using it, they covered it up with the painting. My grandma went pale and moved the painting. The hole was of course still there. I always thought it was how clever I was, until my family enlightened me and told me it was because only one other person knew about that hole, and that person was my dead uncle. I've always loved horror. Horror movies, horror stories, all of it. I've also always had a deep imagination, making horror more livid and even more terrifying. I live in a 2-story house with large windows, but that's not really important. What is important is that the 2nd story consists of a long hallway, with my parents' bedroom as the very first room, my sister the second, and mine at the end. The bathroom is at a right angle from my bedroom, meaning that when I want to use the bathroom, I have to walk into the hall and take a left. Right across from my room is the office. We all call it the office because my dad used to use it as one, though it really is more of a storage room now. Stored in the office is an old futon, my sister's old mattress that my parents haven't got rid of, and a bunch of new mirrors that my family wanted to hang up in the house eventually. The office doesn't have any working lights because my parents keep forgetting to get it fixed. One night, right after we had a nice large dinner and a scary movie, we went upstairs to bed. In my nightly routine, I go to my parents' room with them to hang out and talk with them for about 10 minutes before I go to my room and sleep. I hung out and spoke with them, talked about school, about how rough pre-algebra was, and the like. We spoke until my younger sister came into the room, asking if she could sleep with my parents because she was scared after the film. They agreed and made room for her by pushing me away. They all settled, and I announced that I was going to my room because I wasn't scared. I was just trying to talk myself out of admitting that I was a little scared too. I marched down the hall and completed my nightly routine of brushing my teeth, putting on my pajamas, and staring into the office for a minute, and then climbing into bed as slowly as possible to prevent the bed from creaking, which unsettled me for some reason. I set my alarm clock to wake me up at 6 a.m, just when the sun would be rising. I had a habit of waking up at exactly dawn. Anyway, I tucked myself under the comforter and faced the ceiling. I only lay on my back for a few seconds. When I have the urge to change, I then roll to face the bookshelf to my right, across from my bed. And when I shift, the rustling of the blankets barely disguises the sound of the door creaking in the hall. I freeze and lock in the half-rotated position, my ears strained to hear if another creak will follow. When I realize my heart is beginning to pick up speed, I try to reason with myself. Maybe it was just the floorboards settling, or the heat coming on and making a noise. Maybe Mum and Dad got up. Half of my brain was thinking all these things, but the other half was busy with making darker thoughts. Someone's in the house. Could it be a ghost? I jumped out so badly when I heard another creak, sounding less like an opening door and more like a footstep. A heavy footstep. I forced myself to look calmly up in the direction of the office. My mother always told me to listen to my gut, and it's telling me it's coming from there. The shadows in the dark hall make the office door look much more like a gaping black hole. I lean back in my bed, pulling the sheets over me further. God, I'm such a wimp. As I'm thinking, another footstep startles me, followed by another door creak. Mum? Dad? Greta? I whisper quietly, expecting one of them to step into the room and say goodnight. But instead, my ears continue to ring from the perpetual silence. I don't know why I did it, either to impress myself or to end the unknowing fear gnawing at me. I sat up abruptly and whispered harshly, "Get the hell away." I prepared myself for a scolding from either my mom or my dad for cursing, but got no reply. I lay back down and pull the covers over me again. I keep reasoning with myself, but it's too late for that, and my over-imagination self-kicks into action, making everything worse. All of the shadows cast around my room seemed to look more humanoid, and every whistle from outside seemed to sound like loud breathing. I kept willing myself to get out of bed and go to my parents' room, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I somehow managed to fall asleep at 1:23 a.m. My alarm clock awoke me. I snoozed it, remembering vaguely the events of last night. Feeling sweaty and gross, I decided to take a shower. And although I turned the water to very hot, the water came out freezing. After a few moments of listening to the quiet water running, I felt like I was being watched. I pull back the curtain and peek out. There's no one. And finally, when I couldn't stand the shower anymore, I climbed out and dried it off. After getting dressed, I heard my father announce that he was going to the store with Greta. My mother and I didn't want to go, so they left. In my room, I sat at my computer watching videos on YouTube. My mother told me she was going for a short walk, part of her daily hike. She works on getting fit, so she's usually out walking for an hour at a time. "Okay," I called down to her. She calls back up at me, telling me the rules of being alone. Don't answer the door, and don't go outside, and to go to the neighbours if I'm in trouble. I hear her open the door, close, lock it, and leave. I relax once more, and click on another video. My desk is facing the wall, with my back facing the doorway, and the empty hall beyond that, and the office beyond that. When suddenly, that feeling of being watched hits me again, and I turn in time to see something dart out my peripheral vision. I whip around, heart racing again. Man, I overreact so much. I sit staring at the office for what feels like forever, without really thinking. I suddenly stand and start walking towards the office door. Hand on the cold doorknob. I open the door and inhale the cold, dusty air. It smelled like cardboard. I stepped forward, eyes moving immediately to the dark corner of the room. Hidden behind the mattress I mentioned earlier, I take another step. I heard breathing. Ragged, heavy breathing. I freaked out so badly, stumbled back from the corner. The darkness seemed to reach out to me and send chills into my body, almost as if it were taking control. The breathing got louder, not coming from the corner anymore, but seemingly from all around me. I fell backwards out of the office and closed the door, ran down the stairs and went outside. I walked down the road until I spotted my mum, and I stayed with her for the rest of the walk. I never told my family, because I don't want them thinking that I was making it up for attention. I will never forget about it though, and whether you believe or not that it happened, I'm so glad that we moved from that house 1 year later. The first incident happened when I was 5. I have an excellent long-term memory. It is photographic. I was in an old town in Massachusetts, Milford, an old apartment built in the 1800s, the year 1998. My mother, a hairdresser, was reading the newspaper sometime in the afternoon before going to work. wearing her black scrub-like material at our basic 4-person dinner table. In the kitchen, one can see the entrance to the bathroom, with its bright light radiating through the bathroom as a result of its blue subway tiles. No doubt a throwback to the last century. I was next to my mother at the table, talking about when we were leaving to be dropped off at my aunt's house down the road. I had a sense to look at the bathroom door, and in the doorway of the bathroom, I see a man, over 6 foot, young with shoulder-length hair, Civil War-looking uniform, and everything. He's just there. I'm afraid, yet not afraid. The man smiled and turned and walked deeper into the bathroom. He was see-through, but had mass, almost two-dimensional. It was amazing in retrospect. I recalled pulling her arm and saying, "Mama, Mama," and asked who the man was. She was clueless. The next occurrence happened when I was 15 during my 8th to 9th grade year of summer reading. To preface this, I had a cat named Fluffy, who was the best friend until age 11. When she died, my evil neighbour poisoned her. Her death took something from me. I know it sounds crazy, but I truly loved her. Well, this particular day, my twin brother, my sister and myself were on our deck reading our book, when my sister says, "Do you see a cat in the window?" I hadn't seen a cat in years. I look in the window to the 2nd floor, and there is a cat at the window. However, the cat was grey and see-through. I could see the plant behind the cat in the window. Fluffy was grey as well, and what truly caught my attention were the eyes. The eyes were a very bright yellow within this grey apparition, just like hers had been in life. And around those yellow eyes, as I maintained eye contact for at least 15 minutes, which felt more like an hour. Now let me remind you, I loved her truly. I would spend hours with her after school. I didn't get over her death for a long time. I think seeing her was her way of letting us know that she still watches over us. Thinking about this, it's on the 2nd floor, almost as if she's looking over us, like from a higher place. Saying this is a bit emotional for me. I looked back up and she was gone. I felt like I had woken up from a dream. And to add to this, many years after, my sister and I shared a dream where my deceased German Shepherd Hannah was chasing Fluffy as they did in life, but didn't catch her. My sister's dream was in our home, where Hannah was chasing her, but couldn't get her. This home was at the bottom of our hill that we lived, and by the end of the dream, my sister said Hannah and Fluffy were walking up the hill together side by side, as if Fluffy were bringing Hannah over to the other side. My dream. I woke up on an oversized mattress outside at the top of our hill. The ambient lighting was hues not on this earth. I remember awakening, getting off the bed and seeing Fluffy halfway down the hill. I remember squatting down to say hello to her and pet her as I did in life, but I didn't see Hannah. And then I woke, and it was as if she finally passed. I told my mother the dream, to which she said my sister had a dream that was comparable to my own. I asked my sister, as this was where I got the information. I never saw her or dreamed of her again, and I wonder if there may be something beyond. I struggle with this myself. Maybe the experience will offer consolation to some. As a child, I always had imaginary friends. My mother used to not question anything when I would be alone in my room, and spoke to what seemed like no one. I told multiple family members and friends of my friend Henry. from the time I was at least 8 until I was 14 or 15, I saw Henry. Since my family only knew of Henry, of someone I saw, they assumed it was the little boy. But Henry was a man. He would sit in my room and watch me play, and he would always be there when I was sad. He was nice. When I was 21, I told my mum one morning, after listening to a Thriller Thursday, that Henry was a man I saw in our house. My mother had never told me that she always felt like there was something in our house, until I told her about Henry and that she was real. She told me that she was going to look up something on him and see if she could figure out who he was. And out of nowhere, I told her that Henry was just his middle name. And I don't know how I knew that. She went and looked up obituaries in our area for Henry, and she found him. William Henry Smith owned property by our house, and his great-grandson lived in the house before us. He had 6 children, one of which was his daughter he called Katie Smith, and that's my name. We are no relation to that set of Smiths, but the connection is unreal. He is also buried in the cemetery just across the road from our house. This happened a few years ago when I was in grade school. It was the middle of winter, and my boyfriend and I decided we were going to go pick up a couple of friends and drive out of town and go get baked. We drove around 15 minutes away from the town to an area near the lake and found a good area to spark up. We were a little ways into the woods where nobody could see the lights from the truck. That way, we could leave the truck running and get warm. We proceeded to load the bong and take a few smokes before heading back into town to grab some munchies. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. What the hell were you doing driving out of town to smoke weed? Well, I live in a town, a very small town mind you, in Alberta, Canada, and we were a bunch of paranoid teenagers who did not want to get caught smoking weed, and we drove back to town. We were heading to McDonald's, which is in the opposite end of town from where we drove in. We drove off the main road and down a couple of streets towards the trucker's route to McDonald's. But something super weird happened on one of those roads. I can absolutely say that we had had nothing to do with the fact that we were all baked, because we all saw the same thing and freaked the hell out. So my boyfriend turned onto this road, and as I looked out the passenger side window, I noticed this guy walking on the sidewalk in the opposite direction we were heading. He wore a black hoodie and a pair of jeans, but no jacket. And let me tell you that midwinter in Alberta is absolutely freezing. On this night, it was about -23 Celsius and snowing pretty damn good. This guy was not dressed for the weather at all. But then again, a lot of people around here are either too stupid to dress for the weather or too poor to afford it, so I didn't think anything of it at first. We were driving a bit slower due to road conditions, but not by much, and we were getting closer to passing the guy on the sidewalk, when suddenly he turned towards the road in the direction of the truck and started to speed up. I screamed at my boyfriend to watch out and avoid the guy, but before I could finish my sentence, he ran in front of the passenger side of the truck. However, where we should have heard and felt the impact of his body from when he threw himself against the truck, there was nothing. No sound, no impact, and when we looked to check if he was okay, he was gone. When I say gone, I mean non-existent. There were no footprints leading to the truck, and there was no body. And it was as if he'd just vanished into thin air. Now, if you're still under the impression that we were just baked, think about how multiple people saw the same apparition and the exact same thing. That can't be explained away just by being a little high. I looked back at everyone and asked them if they'd all seen what happened, and everyone nodded their heads in disbelief. I told my boyfriend to drive away, and that's when everyone began freaking out. Like this experience wasn't freaking enough, the fact that we were all high made it even worse. But it was not a trick of the mind. We never did get our munchies, but we all decided it would be best if we just went home instead. Obviously, I never found out who the guy was, because he vanished, where he went, or if he was even real. But I just hope I don't have an experience like that again. When I was 16, back in 2012, my parents had already separated, and I was living with my mum and my late brother's son in my mother's house. My mum and dad at the time were on an on and off basis, and one particular night, my mum went to visit my dad for the weekend. My cousin and her 2 kids came over to keep me and my nephew company. We live in a township in South Africa, and our house was a 4-roomed brick house. You would enter first through the back door and into the kitchen. Then the sitting room is to your left, and the bathroom is to your right. My room was on the left, next to the sitting room, and facing the bathroom, and my mum's room was straight ahead facing the kitchen and hallway. Now, on the weekend my mum left, my cousin and her 2 kids were sleeping in my room, whilst me and my nephew slept in my mum's room. We would turn off all the lights in the house, except the kitchen light, so the reflections could be seen from the hallway and entering straight ahead in my mum's room. We were a family of prayer, and every night at midnight we would pray with candles placed on the floor of the hallway, and we would not put them out for the rest of the night. It was a night like no other, and me and my cousin had just finished our prayers. We went to bed in separate rooms, but somehow I felt like I was seeing things. It was at that moment when you're just about to doze off, but you're still aware of your surroundings. Now, I've always seen things like shadow people around these moments of consciousness, especially in my brother's room. It was my late brother's room before, but my mum said I could use it as my own after his death. Now, it has never been the same since. Or maybe I was just overreacting and missing my brother. But it became much colder than the other rooms in the house, regardless of the weather. Sometimes I would see a crowd of people's shadows at my window, and on other nights, I would feel someone sitting on top of me as I slept and be completely unable to move. This night was different. It felt real, like I was asleep but I could still see my surroundings. The light emanating from the kitchen reaches my mum's room, door and wardrobe, and in that light I can see the shadow of a man in a suit entering the room. As his shadow grows bigger, swallowing the light from the hallway and falling onto the wardrobe. I was so scared that I couldn't scream for my cousin in the next room. I finally woke up and got up and went to tell my cousin what happened. She told me to say the Lord's Prayer and to go back to sleep. I did as I was told, but I could not remember the words to the prayer. I told her this, and she came into my mum's room and helped me pray and rebuke whatever it was I saw. The words slowly came back to me and I could fall asleep again. It's safe to say, I never saw whatever that was again.